Look at that. Feminine energy in all her glory once again. This is day 31 of 34 or more. I highly apologize for not being more consistent over the past week or so. I had been on a good level, on a good, in a good place. But, the last couple of weeks, I've had these interactions with my ex that once again proved to me that I did make the right decision, but it also showed me something about myself that um, I have to begin to be more honest with myself. I was probably madder at her than I've ever been mad at her over the last week. Well, actually, there was just an incident that happened Sunday that just put me in such a dark place. I was so angry that I had some horrible thoughts like ravaging throughout my whole being. Like I was so upset. Um, and, to be honest, I'm beginning to be able to compartmentalize this. I don't know how to call it. Um, these interactions where I am completely fine and on a good level, and then there's always something that can happen regarding my ex that can draw me back into that energy that I was in before I left. My thing is to understand more about me than her. At this point, after 15, 16, 17 years of knowing this person, there's only one person who can get me this way. There's only one person who can push my emotions over this boiling point. And, when these things started happening, these types of incidents, these types of conflicts between my ex and I started happening, um, I was more focused on her than me. I was more focused on being right or objective and trying to find solutions to matters. And with her not being able to see some of these same subject matters from my perspective, I was more offended and upset with her than understanding that it's not that she's wrong, it's just that her perspective on certain things are different than mine. And also, I didn't like how she articulated some of those differences. But that's neither here nor there because, you know, after you deal with a person at a certain point, you just have to understand that you're dealing with what you are dealing with. Um, the great Haga said on a particular song, and I'm not quoting him word for word, but he was talking about this argument that he was having with uh, his significant other, not the significant other that he's currently with, which I don't know for sure. I don't know if it came from a real life experience or if they was just bars. You know what I'm saying? Um, Either way, they were profound words. He said, "You can't change nothing about a man except his address. And since this is my house, I ain't moving." He didn't say the "I ain't moving" part, but he did allude to the fact that I'm not changing for you. I can't change for you, number one. Um, and if this is what you're thinking that this is about, then you may as well leave now. Um, my ex couldn't change me, and I couldn't change my ex. And in the beginning, that was a problem for both of us. However, once you come into the realization that no, you cannot change anybody, and you still go about that practice of trying to, it leads to way more suffering in the long run than anything else. So, you know, and it also gets back to the point is that they who they show you to be until they show you different, that's who they are, and you must accept that. See, we have a hard time accepting that because a lot of us are fueled by sex and money and wanting to establish control, um, and seeing the relationship they're in as more of a benefit or something for them than something that two people can share together and grow. I know I've said this a lot, but it's still along the same lines. When it was revealed to me that I was more of a relationship than a connection to her, when it was revealed to me that this was a relationship for her benefit rather than something that we can both share, I reacted in a horrible manner because I was so hurt and I could not believe at that particular way, at that particular junction, that I had been taken advantage of. Like this was not about me, it was not about us. And actually, what hurt me more than anything was that it was not about us, it was just about her. I just didn't know, nor was I aware that she would ever do that to me. Even though we did have a rocky relationship, there was definitely butting of heads. But as far as participating in the act of blatant disloyalty, I never thought in a million years that she would even conceptualize something to that degree. So what I'm trying to say is I know who and what the fuck I'm dealing with, and I've known about it for a long time. I mentioned in my book, My Road to Damascus, a journey through spirituality and mental health that leads to liberation and personal development, that we can begin to become. Is that too much? Is that too wordy? We can get addicted to relationships, to people, to actions. When you're in a healthy relationship where the two people are really genuinely in love, not only does I love you mean something because you actually do love them, but it can be habitual in the fact that if you're saying it to each other every day, if there's a day or a space or a period of time where it's not being said, um, there could be a tendency of thinking that something may or may not be wrong. In a healthy relationship, that doesn't necessarily happen often because both of them have been shown by the other the true love that can be expressed towards one another. So that's not really the issue, unless there could be some type of a period of time where there's a bit of a misunderstanding or a little bit of friction or something like that, and two people are mad at each other, and you know how to do the silent treatment and all that old weird shit that happens in relationships, all relationships really. But when they're in healthy relationships, they're easy to, at some point, cooler heads will prevail, and then they'll just talk it out. When it's an unhealthy relationship, the addictions can just be horribly toxic because depending on what's driving the relationship, the addiction will be at its worst. So if the relationship is being driven by like sex, um, the two people might not be able just to articulate, man, I just want to fuck you all the time. I want to make love to you all the time. They may not be able to say it like that. Yeah, it's cool for a great date, dinner, some romance, maybe even a little bit of dancing, talking real nice to each other, and then making love at the end of the night. That's cool. But at certain points, that could be boring. So, what can also happen, and you discover it by mistake. This is where you discover it. It's by mistake that you discover this. But there's nothing like makeup sex. Now, we all know this. Anybody who's been in, any type of long-term relationship, they've been in love with somebody, and um, they really cared about these individuals, and they had all these different, ups and downs of a relationship. The shit that relationships do. You know, after that first argument, and you first have that first makeup sex, there's nothing more explosive than that, because at first it was all lovey-dovey. Now you got to the point where you actually came across a problem. You both solved it together. And that was something else that turned you on as well. Mentally, subconsciously, the fact that you were able to have a problem, a disagreement, and work it out was also a huge fucking turn on, which made the sex that much better. Now, if you're in a toxic relationship where you argue a lot, there's nothing else good going on in the marriage or the relationship, whatever it might be, if there's nothing else good going on in there and you both know you guys connect and have an extremely great compatible sexual life and you love each other on that level, like you just nasty with each other on that level, a lot of times, just because you don't have anything good to say, you say something fucked up that you know is going to cause some friction, just so you can have a reason to make up and have that sex. The problem is this shit is not really articulated when the two individuals are going through this. You know what I'm saying? And you also have to take into consideration that if this type of thing does occur, you have to know that one or both of you only got any real attention when you did some fucked up shit. If you get straight A's on your report card, good job. That's what you're supposed to do. You know what I'm saying? If you do something good around the house, that's what you're supposed to do. They might praise you for it. Oh, that was your very first time washing all the dishes. Oh man, that's so great. Now they know your ass could do it. After that, it's over with. But sometimes we had more um, scalding than positive reinforcement. And what I mean by positive reinforcement is, instead of being mad at your child when that child one morning gets up and say, "Mommy, I want to make you some breakfast this morning," and they go try to make some eggs and they burn the eggs, instead of yelling at her for burning the eggs and potentially burning the damn house down, what you can do is say, "Oh, these eggs look delicious, but let me show you how I like my eggs cooked. So the next time you cook eggs for me, you can cook them just like this." And then you take your daughter or your son and you show them the proper way how to cook the eggs so they won't burn the fucking house down. Now that's positive reinforcement. But the scolding part, you stupid motherfucker, you just burn the eggs, or these motherfuckers are the nastiest things, but you ain't got no season. Don't you know we got a cabinet full of all kind of seasonings? You didn't put shit on my fucking eggs. Like there's some, I mean, that's extreme, but I know that there's some parents that talk to their kids like this. And when you speak to kids like this, those kids become adults who get addicted to negative energy, who get addicted to people talking shit to them. And they only feel real attention when they have that conflict. When the more dysfunctional shit is, the better they fit in. I don't care how much meditation you can put in the house. I don't care how much weed you can smoke. A person who didn't receive positive, unconditional love as a child grow into adults that are shaped by those words that the people over them showered down on them. Phew, that was cold-blooded, wasn't it? Unfortunately, with black folks, we have this weird thing that subconsciously, it's not as bad now, but for whatever reason, it just seemed like, some of the same type of shit that white folks would physically do to punish black folks for, black folks in turn did those same things to their kids. They were trained how to be disciplined. Those slave masters were, quote unquote, disciplining them when they whipped them and beat them. That's what they told them. And that's what they had been shaped into throughout the generations. And those same things, what we quote unquote call discipline, we passed those same things down to our children. And somewhere in the last 10 years, there's been an outpouring of all of these fucked up people crying out for help. Fucked up not in the fact that they're fucked up, they're bad people, no. Fucked up in the sense that they were getting all this negative energy, these evil traditions that were passed. And it's literally an evil tradition. Spanking somebody with a belt, telling somebody to pull a goddamn I saw that shit on the Breakfast Club today. Telling somebody to pull their own switch off the fucking tree. And you bet not come back with one that's small. But see, here's the slickest thing about that part. They usually take the branch that you give them, they trim all the shit down, and by the time they trim everything off, it's just some real little skinny ass switch. Which in fact meant they didn't want you to bring down a small switch. They wanted to make the small switch because the small switch had the most pain that resonated through it when it was hit on you right. And the most evil shit would be to whoop you with a switch and then send you to take a bath. Now that didn't happen to me, but it happened to a lot of my friends. And obviously it happened to Charlemagne the God as well. So you look at that individual who went through that type of trauma, and then you put them in a situation where they're with another person who went through another form of trauma, and these traumas wasn't addressed, and then they're getting together, and they love each other, but they don't like each other, and they don't want to admit this to each other. You know, I do remember there was a day that I even told my ex, I said, I just don't feel in my heart that I love you anymore. I don't know if I ever really loved you. And I don't really know if she actually grasped that or in her mind, because of the way she had been conditioned, maybe that could have actually been an act of love coming from me because it revealed honesty. That could have been something. Or maybe she felt that she didn't deserve to be loved, so that was fine with her. Fine, you could be here. Fine, we can still stay together even though you don't love me. Fine. She didn't just come out, she didn't say that at all. But I'm saying, when I told her that, for most women, that would have been it then. But for her, we did another 4, 5, 6 years after that. So, like, now through my woo-woo years, and what I call them by woo-woo, I'm being affectionately funny. But these spiritual things that I've been learning, man, all this shit is like some woo-woo shit to me. Like, man, this shit is so, it's the coolest shit in the world, but at the same time, it's just really crazy. Because at some point along the line, I just wanted peace, meditation, sex, and money. It's not really a lot. And I began to realize that the amount of money that I want, the amount of peace that I'm entitled to, the sex that I need, was not going to be found in this particular relationship that I was currently in. I wasn't strong enough to get out. And that's part of the addiction. You're scared and you start thinking what if I don't have enough? What if I can't do it on my own? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my kids? And then you begin to develop the scenarios in which you can come to some type of an agreement. And you say to yourself that, you know what? Okay, fine. Listen, if you can just, if we can just have A, B, and C, then X, Y, and Z should fall into place pretty easy. Do you see how unhealthy that is? Because now what you're doing is taking more out of yourself and putting it in a place where it's needed the least. You're trying to compromise yourself to appease the other individual. What you have swirling around in your mind of what the perfect relationship is, or what, you know, the best outcome of a relation is, what you have swirling in your mind as it regards to that, this is what you really want in your outside experience. This is what you want with your mate. The problem is, do you both want it, or do you just want it? And if you're the only one that want it, number one, can you accept that? And number two, if you can't accept it, what the fuck are you gonna do about it? So I was tiptoeing on the edge of the pool, sticking my toe in. Or you can equate it to something that you can find in the Bible. If you've ever heard this verse, I think maybe even Jesus said it. He said, remember Lot's wife. Now, God was about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham was considered a friend of God. Abraham found out that Lot and his family moved to Sodom and Gomorrah, and he went to God. And when he heard that God was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, he remembered that Lot lives there. And could you please spare Sodom and Gomorrah because of my nephew? Well, God didn't want to. So God began the processes of doing what he was going to do. So then Abraham said, look, this is a whole city full of people. If we can find 1,000 righteous men, I don't know the numbers right now off the bat. I'm just giving you the example, but this is what the story went, how the story went. If you can find 100 righteous people in this town, would you spare Sodom and Gomorrah? God said, if you can find 100 righteous people, I will spare it. But the shit started happening, which obviously meant to Abraham that no, he can't find 100 righteous people. He said, well, look, can you take it down to 10? If we could find just 10 righteous men in this whole city, can you stop destroying it right now? Shit kept happening, which meant there was not 10 righteous people. Then he said, well, if you can find one righteous people, can you spare the whole city for one righteous people? Shit kept happening. He said, look, my nephew's here, man. Can you just let him get out? Well, they make a way. Lot gets out. Abraham said to Lot, and I can't remember if God told him this, but he said, When you leave Sodom and Gomorrah, you completely run. You don't look back. You just run. Go. Have the faith that wherever you go to, I'm going to have it taken care of for you. Everything will be fine. But just go. Do not look back. Lot's wife looked back and was turned to stone. The metaphor of life in that is that when we have to make a life decision, sometimes there could be no in between. Sometimes there's only up and down. Sometimes there's only left and right. Sometimes it's only black and white. But when you make that decision, you got to stick to that decision. Because if you waver, if you keep being inconsistent with the follow through, all it does is add to the already emotional and mental trauma that you're undergoing. And it's also telling the other person that you can't leave them, that you're not strong enough to leave. That's what it says. You ain't strong enough to make it on your own. That's how they take it. So then they further use that to their advantage, especially after the relationship, quote unquote, ends. An individual can have a hell of a time because when they had the opportunity to go to seek real peace and refuge and heal and begin to grow, they kept looking at that thing that hurt them in their lives the most. And because they're pretty much addicted to that type of pain, it's harder to break away from it. This is what's going on with me, man. I'm getting strong, but then something happens and it knocks me down a few pegs. It makes me feel weak. I get so angry with myself because I allow myself to go back to a place that I fought so fiercely to get out of. And healing is tough. An open wound of mine had a little bit of salt poured into it, and I just couldn't keep myself together, so I bled on innocent individuals. And for that, I'm deeply sorry. Like, it wasn't nothing major. Like, I was just really expressing myself, but I didn't have the control that I was supposed to have. I let my emotions and my anger and even hatred build back up into me. I was hurt. And I began to feel like still, like, I can't believe this person still can get to me this way. Like, I just felt so disrespected. You know, which makes it even more fucked up when you already know who you're dealing with. So that's the funny part about it, is the fact that you do get upset. You know, you get mad. This person can trigger you more than anybody else. You know that, but yet and still you allow yourself to go there. I'm grateful that I've come this way, but it's still a painful reality that I have so much further to go. While at the same time, I also feel like I'm blessed that now I know how to put all these thoughts together and think about them out loud and even write them down. I know how to do all that now, which, when these types of things flare up in the past, I was just pretty much, you know, trying to keep a bike even when the front tire's off. You know how hard it is to ride a goddamn bike if the front tire ain't on that motherfucker? That's what I was trying to do with my feelings and my emotions and how to deal with this situation. So, like, I just ain't really felt like keeping an update and a countdown on 34 or more. It was just hard to get my energy right. Like, I felt like I didn't have a lot to say no more. Um, but I did make some promises to myself. I did take some time to do something good to and for myself. I'm glad I can see all this right now. I still feel bad, but I'm just grateful that I could see this now. I'm grateful that I can see that it was my choice to be mad like that. To be honest with you, I chose to be that mad. I chose to have all those horrible scenarios play out in my mind. That wasn't me. Those are just things and thoughts I was choosing to grasp onto instead of more positive things that I could have been more constructive in doing. And it sounds like I'm kind of in anguish about this over myself. Like, I'm not. I'm just tired, really. Um, and not in like a weird way. Like I'm not. Man, I'm just tired of going through. Like, I was on that level at a certain point, but now I'm just more physically fatigued and a bit mentally fatigued than anything. So, I've been um, just kind of wanting to have all these thoughts um, put in a manner of being structured. You know what I'm saying? And being that I can structure all these thoughts out and think about it correctly, you know, I definitely see that there's some fucking growth. But, you know, such is life. I'm grateful for these experiences. And the promises that I made was I'm going to just stick to the code of being present. I'm going to stick to the code of being focused on reception more, being more open to receive. You know, I'm going to begin to apply my wisdom more because I know a lot of shit. I've learned a lot of shit. I'm going to continue to be in that frequency of love and love energy. I don't want people just to send me energy. I want people to put some love in that energy when they sending it to me. Because if somebody just sent energy to me, I'm not really sure what their intent is. And if they ain't really sure on what the true intent of the energy that they're sending me is, then, shit can get mixed up in translation. You know what I'm saying? And I'm also moving myself in the frequency of money. I want to move into a higher frequency so I can attract higher amounts of money. These are promises that I'm just being more intentional about as I'm moving forward, because at this point I have not moved on, I'm moving on. And I want to get to a point where anything that ever comes from her words, her energy, her attitude, just take it just like you would take an average person off the street that you don't even know. Do it really mean that much to you? Is trying to win a disagreement with her, is that worth any amount of peace? Should you give a fuck about a person that you don't even know not liking you? When a motherfucker disrespects you, can you get to the place where it's not necessarily about getting even? Sometimes you just have to let them know how you feel. And I remember a video that I put out last week when I say if something happens to you, you may not be able to address it the instant it happens, but you need to address it in a timely manner. And it's best to not let more than a day go by, depending on how much it affected you. And I was proud of myself that without even thinking about that video, that I said that in that video, that something had happened. I kind of processed it in the way that I did. And then the next morning, when I had an opportunity to confront her with the issue, I did. The other shit that happened after that was just me falling into that incredible loop of anger that I know all too well. I hadn't been there in a minute. So to go there, unfortunately, did have some type of pleasure that I got out of it, which is another thing that a lot of people don't admit. Somehow you can get pleasure out of pain. Like, you're willing to be called damn near anything from your significant other if you can just keep getting that pussy. You can take a lot of shit from a motherfucker who giving you that dick right if you the women. Or even if you guys, I mean, whatever floats your boat. But what I'm trying to say is, when it's being driven by lust and sex, somehow it just ends up being that good between those two individual people. Somehow they feel like they can't get better from nowhere else. So they keep subjecting themselves to this because, sure, they think they can get it just as good from somebody else. But it's always looming in the back of their mind. What if they don't? So they want to keep you around for that. But then another thing that could happen with that is they'll keep you around, but that doesn't mean that they're not fucking around on you. Sometimes that could be part of a scenario. And if that's part of a scenario, then that's a whole nother layer of shit. Man, this is heavy. But like I said, I'm recognizing all this shit. And it's showing me about myself. It's showing me that there's still a process going on here, a process of growth, and a process of still healing. ING, the action word.